When superior intelligence meets superior stupidity, Admiral Zykoth stood before the holographic display in the command center of the Keltharian flagship Logical Conclusion, his four crystalline eyes reflecting the soft blue glow of tactical data streams. Around him, the bridge hummed with the quiet efficiency that had made the Keltharian hegemony the most successful conquest force in 3 galactic arms. Every movement was calculated, every decision based on mathematical probability, every outcome predicted by their quantum tactical computers. "Final briefing, Admiral," announced Chief Tactical Analyst Rexon, his voice carrying the same emotionless precision that marked all Keltharian communication. "Target designation, SOL-3, locally designated Earth. Classification, primitive agricultural world with limited technological development." Zykoth nodded, his attention focused on the rotating planetary display. Earth looked deceptively peaceful, its blue oceans and swirling white clouds giving it an almost serene appearance. The tactical overlay showed scattered light signatures, marking population centers, primitive transportation networks, and what appeared to be recreational facilities scattered across the surface. "Population analysis," Zykoth requested. "Approximately 8.1 billion bipedal mammals," Rexon reported, consulting his data streams. "Average lifespan, 72 local years. Technology level, early space age with limited orbital capability. Primary energy sources, fossil fuel combustion and primitive nuclear fission. Military capability, projectile weapons with some guided missile technology." The Admiral's tactical mind processed this information with the same methodical approach that had brought victory to 127 previous worlds. It was almost insultingly simple. No energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no gravitational manipulation devices. These creatures were barely past the Stone Age by Keltharian standards. "Defensive capabilities?" he inquired. "Minimal," Rexon replied with what might have been satisfaction if Keltharians were capable of such emotional displays. "No orbital defense platforms, no energy barriers around population centers. They appear to have pointed their most powerful weapons at each other rather than toward space. Analysis suggests they are incapable of unified planetary defense." Strategic Coordinator Velix, whose role was to identify potential complications in their conquest protocols, cleared her throat with a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Admiral, there is one notation in the preliminary survey data that our analysts flagged for review." "Proceed," Zykoth commanded. "The planet carries a Class 15 designation in the Galactic Survey database, but our scouts classified it as a standard agricultural world. There appears to be some discrepancy in the classification protocols." Zykoth waved one of his forearms dismissively. "Survey bureaucracy," he stated with the confidence of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through superior firepower and logical thinking. "Their classification system is notoriously inefficient. Our own tactical analysis takes precedence over outdated survey data." What Admiral Zykoth didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the discrepancy Velix had mentioned was actually a 47,000-page scientific document detailing exactly why Earth had been classified as a Class 15 Deathworld. The file included detailed warnings about atmospheric composition, geological instability, extreme weather patterns, and something the survey team had labeled as biological impossibilities that should not exist but somehow do. Their scouts had read exactly the first page of this document before filing it under administrative error and moving on to more important matters, like calculating the most efficient orbital bombardment patterns. "Fleet status," Zykoth commanded. "All vessels ready for hyperspace translation," reported Fleet Coordinator Jexis. 47 battlecruisers, 23 troop transports, and 156 support vessels. Estimated conquest time, 72 hours for complete planetary subjugation, 30 days for full administrative integration. The numbers were beautiful in their precision. The Keltharian military machine had perfected the art of conquest through mathematical certainty. Every variable had been calculated, every contingency planned for, every possible resistance scenario mapped and countered. "Commence hyperspace translation," Admiral Zykoth ordered. "Target coordinates, Earth's largest ocean, directly above their most populated coastal regions. We'll demonstrate our superiority, demand their surrender, and begin integration protocols. The logical conclusion and its escort fleet vanished into the twisted dimensions of hyperspace, carrying with them the absolute confidence that came from 127 consecutive victories and tactical planning that had never failed. They emerged from hyperspace exactly where their computers had calculated they would, 3,000 meters above the North Atlantic Ocean during the third week of September. This timing was, according to their tactical analysis, optimal for demonstrating their technological superiority to the maximum number of witnesses while minimizing potential complications from seasonal weather variations. Their computers had failed to account for the fact that the third week of September was also the peak of Atlantic hurricane season. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came when Navigation Officer Pixis announced in a voice that climbed several octaves, "Admiral, we are experiencing severe atmospheric disturbance. Wind speeds are measuring at 185 kilometers per hour with gusts up to 220. Through the flagship's primary viewport, sheets of rain lashed against the transparent aluminum, with enough force to make the entire vessel shudder. Lightning cracked across the sky in patterns that seemed specifically designed to interfere with sophisticated electronic systems, and the ocean below churned with waves that reached heights that challenged the laws of physics, as understood by most civilized species. This is impossible, Admiral Zyketh stated, watching his perfectly organized fleet struggle to maintain formation in conditions that their environmental systems had classified as unsurvivable for most known life forms. Our meteorological analysis indicated stable weather patterns. Sir, Chief Engineer Corbex's voice crackled through the communication system over the sound of what appeared to be their own hull plating coming loose. We're experiencing system failures across multiple sections. The atmospheric moisture is interacting with our defensive screens in ways that violate several laws of physics. Before Zyketh could respond, Communications Officer Tithes announced, "Admiral, we're being approached by indigenous vessels. 3. Small craft bearing directly toward our position." "Finally," Zyketh exclaimed, seizing on this return to familiar territory. "Primitive vessels coming to witness our arrival. Prepare the intimidation protocols and translation matrices. This is how proper first contact should proceed." Through the storm-lashed viewport, 3 boats became visible, bouncing across the waves with the casual confidence of objects that had no business surviving in conditions that were currently threatening to tear apart starships designed to withstand cosmic radiation. The boats were clearly primitive. No energy shields, no gravitational stabilizers, just simple hulls powered by internal combustion engines that were older than some Keltharian colonies. "Sir," Tithes reported, his voice carrying a note of confusion that was highly unusual for a Keltharian. "The lead vessel is broadcasting on primitive radio frequencies. They appear to be offering assistance." The bridge fell silent, except for the sound of rain trying to dissolve their ship and the gentle hum of translation matrices working overtime. "Assistance?" Zyketh repeated slowly. "Yes, sir. The captain of the lead vessel identifies himself as Captain Rodriguez of the fishing vessel Maria Esperanza. He's asking if we need help with our experimental aircraft and suggesting we follow them to safer waters before the storm gets worse." Admiral Zyketh stared through the viewport at the small boat riding the massive waves with apparent ease, its human crew working with the calm competence of people who considered navigating through conditions that could destroy starships to be roughly equivalent to a Tuesday afternoon fishing trip. "They want to help us?" he asked. "It appears so, sir. Captain Rodriguez is also mentioning something about hot coffee and asking if any of our crew members are injured." The tactical computer that had successfully calculated the conquest of 127 worlds was now displaying error messages in 17 different languages, including 3 that it had apparently invented just for this occasion. The environmental sensors were registering atmospheric conditions that alternated between physically impossible and "please recalibrate sensors before someone gets hurt." "Sir," Engineer Corbex's voice returned, now carrying what could only be described as panic filtered through Keltharian emotional suppression training. "The hull is beginning to show stress fractures. We need to seek shelter immediately, or we're going to discover whether our emergency life support systems work in these atmospheric conditions." Through the communication system, Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled with static and good-natured concern. "Hey up there, your aircraft doesn't look too stable in this weather. We know these waters pretty well. Follow us to the harbor, Maria's. Got some hot soup ready and you folks look like you could use it." Admiral Zyketh looked around his bridge at his crew of highly trained military specialists, all of whom were staring back at him with expressions that suggested they were collectively wondering how they had ended up in a situation where their best hope for survival was following a primitive fishing boat, captained by someone who thought they were having mechanical difficulties. The most advanced military force in 3 galactic arms was being rescued by someone who fished for a living and was worried they might be cold. "Follow them," Zyketh ordered quietly, his voice barely audible over the storm. As the mighty Keltharian war fleet limped through the hurricane behind 3 fishing boats, Admiral Zyketh began to suspect that perhaps their intelligence analysis had overlooked some critical details about this primitive agricultural world. The humans, meanwhile, continued to display the casual competence of people who considered navigating through conditions that could dissolve alien spacecraft to be roughly equivalent to helping lost tourists find their way to the nearest gas station. Behind them, the rest of the Keltharian fleet struggled through the storm, their tactical computers frantically recalculating invasion probabilities while trying to understand how a species that lived on a planet with weather that violated the laws of physics had managed to survive long enough to develop radio technology. The answer to that question, had they bothered to read the complete survey file, was both simple and terrifying. Humans hadn't just survived on a Class 15 Deathworld. They had thrived on it, adapted to it, and eventually decided that the planet wasn't quite dangerous enough for their tastes, so they had invented extreme sports. But Admiral Zyketh wouldn't learn that particular fact until much later, when it was far too late to call off the invasion and pretend this had all been a diplomatic misunderstanding. The Deathworld education. The harbor that Captain Rodriguez led them to was, in Admiral Zyketh's tactical assessment, exactly the sort of defenseless settlement that made conquest practically effortless. Small wooden buildings, simple docks, and not a single defensive installation visible anywhere. The fishing village of Puerto Refugio appeared to be populated by perhaps 300 individuals, none of whom seemed particularly concerned about the arrival of an alien fleet in the middle of a hurricane. What Zyketh failed to understand was that Puerto Refugio had survived approximately 200 years of hurricanes, tsunamis, and various other meteorological events that would have flattened most galactic civilizations. The buildings weren't just wooden. They had been designed by people whose great-grandparents had learned through trial and considerable error how to construct homes that could flex with 150-mile-per-hour winds and still be standing when the storm passed. "Excellent tactical position," Admiral Zyketh announced as the logical conclusion settled into the protected harbor with all the grace of a wounded space whale. "Now we can demonstrate our technological superiority and demand their immediate surrender under controlled conditions." Chief Weapons Officer Blackson consulted his targeting systems with growing confusion. "Sir, I'm having difficulty identifying priority targets. Should I aim for their military installations?" "Those small boats barely qualify as naval vessels," Zyketh replied, studying the collection of fishing boats, pleasure craft, and what appeared to be a Coast Guard cutter that looked like it had been built sometime during Earth's industrial age. "What about their command center?" Zyketh peered through the viewport at the largest building in the village, which appeared to be a combination restaurant, bar, and community center with Christmas lights strung around it despite the fact that it was nowhere near any recognizable holiday season. The building with the illuminated decorations, he decided. That's obviously their leadership facility. Before Blackson could target the establishment known locally as Rosa's Place, which served the best seafood in 3 counties and doubled as the unofficial town meeting hall, Communications Officer Tithes announced, "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmission requests from the surface." "Finally," Zyketh exclaimed. "They're ready to negotiate their surrender." "Actually, sir, Captain Rodriguez is asking if we need medical assistance, and someone called Rosa wants to know if we're hungry. She's offering something called sancocho and says she's already started making extra because we look like we could use a good meal." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Keltharian tactical computers trying to process a scenario they had never been programmed to handle. conquest targets offering food to their would-be conquerors. They want to feed us? Zykoth asked slowly. Yes, sir. Rosa is also asking if any of our crew have dietary restrictions and whether we prefer our rice with beans or plantains. Strategic Coordinator Velix, who had been consulting the cultural analysis protocols, looked up from her data streams with an expression that suggested she was having a minor existential crisis. Sir, according to our preliminary behavioral analysis, these humans appear to be treating our arrival as a social event rather than a military incursion. That's impossible, Zykoth declared. We are clearly a superior military force. Our vessels are obviously designed for combat. How could they mistake us for anything else? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, the village's only resident with a doctorate in marine biology and a hobby interest in UFO sightings, had been monitoring the alien transmissions with equipment that was approximately as sophisticated as a children's toy by Keltharian standards, but was apparently functional enough to crack their communication protocols. Hello up there. Her voice came through the speakers with the cheerful tone of someone greeting visitors at a block party. This is Dr. Chen from the Puerto Refugio Marine Research Station. Welcome to Earth. We're absolutely fascinated to meet you. Are you here for scientific research, or is this more of a cultural exchange mission? The bridge fell silent. Dr. Chen had not only identified them as extraterrestrial visitors, but had immediately assumed they were here for peaceful purposes, and was treating their arrival as the most exciting thing to happen to the village since the time someone caught a fish that was slightly larger than usual. Sir, Tithes reported. She's asking if we'd like to give a presentation at the local school about space travel, and whether any of our crew would be interested in participating in their annual festival next month. Admiral Zykoth was beginning to understand that their tactical computers might have overlooked some significant variables in their conquest calculations. Prepare a landing party, he ordered. We'll demonstrate our superiority in person and make our demands clear. The diplomatic shuttle that emerged from the logical conclusion was a masterpiece of Keltharian engineering, designed to inspire awe and demonstrate technological superiority. It had gleaming hull plating, sophisticated energy systems, and defensive capabilities that could level a city block. What it didn't have was any protection against the flock of pelicans that decided the strange new object looked like it might be carrying fish. The first bird strike occurred when pilot Nexon was still congratulating himself on the smoothness of his atmospheric entry. The pelican, apparently curious about whether the shuttle might be some sort of unusual fishing vessel, expressed its interest by attempting to land on the starboard engine intake. What was that? Demanded Security Chief Corvin, his combat training, having prepared him for many threats but not for aerial assault by indigenous wildlife. According to sensors, we've been attacked by a large flying creature with a brain the size of a fruit and absolutely no sense of danger, Nexon replied, his voice suggesting that his pilot training had not covered this particular scenario. Through the shuttle's viewports, more pelicans circled with the sort of aggressive curiosity that suggested they were considering whether this strange new object might be edible, territorially significant, or both. The shuttle landed on the dock, with one engine making concerning noises and the other decorated with what appeared to be pelican feathers. As the landing ramp lowered, Admiral Zykoth emerged wearing his finest ceremonial armor and carrying a translation device that had cost more than most planets' annual defense budgets. He was greeted by Captain Rodriguez, who was still wearing his rain gear, Dr. Chen, who was practically vibrating with scientific excitement, and Rosa Martinez, a woman in her 60s who ran the local restaurant and had appointed herself the unofficial welcome committee for any interesting visitors. "Welcome to Earth," Dr. Chen exclaimed, extending her hand in the universal human gesture of greeting. "This is absolutely incredible. We have so many questions. How far did you travel? What's your propulsion system? Are you here to study our marine ecosystems?" Admiral Zykoth drew himself up to his full imposing height, activated his translation device, and delivered the speech that had preceded the successful conquest of 127 worlds. "I am Admiral Zykoth of the Keltharian hegemony. This planet is now under our dominion. You will submit to our authority or face the consequences of resistance." Rosa Martinez looked him up and down with the expression of someone evaluating a particularly dramatic teenager, then stepped forward and patted his arm with the sort of gentle firmness that suggested she had raised several children and was not easily intimidated by tall strangers having emotional outbursts. "Mijo," she said in a tone that somehow managed to be both maternal and mildly disapproving, "you look exhausted, and your friends look hungry. Come inside before you catch cold. We can discuss whatever you're worried about after everyone has had something to eat." The silence that followed was so complete that several seabirds stopped their conversations to listen. "Did she just—" Security Chief Corvin began. "Yes," Admiral Zyketh confirmed quietly. "She just offered to feed us." Should we call for reinforcements?" Dr. Chen, meanwhile, was studying the Keltharian delegation with the sort of scientific fascination usually reserved for discovering new species. "Your atmospheric requirements appear similar to ours, but your respiratory systems suggest you evolved in a lower oxygen environment. Are you from a smaller planet? The gravity here must feel quite strong." "We are conducting a military conquest," Admiral Zyketh protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Oh," Dr. Chen replied with the tone of someone who had just learned something mildly interesting but not particularly concerning. "Well, that seems rather inefficient. Have you considered diplomatic contact instead? It's generally more cost-effective and results in much better cultural exchange opportunities." Captain Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "Plus, Rosa makes the best sancocho on the coast. You'd be missing out if you tried to conquer us before dinner." "We are not here for dinner," Zyketh insisted. "We are here to subjugate your species and claim this planet for the Keltharian hegemony." Rosa Martinez clucked her tongue with the disapproval of someone who had heard quite enough nonsense for one day. "Subjugate nothing. You're here because your ship broke down in the storm and now you're getting cranky because you're tired and hungry. Come inside, eat something, take a nap, and we'll help you figure out how to fix your spaceship in the morning." The most feared military commander in 3 galactic arms found himself being gently but firmly herded toward a small restaurant by a human grandmother who was treating the invasion of her planet as roughly equivalent to helping stranded motorists. Behind them, the rest of the landing party followed in a daze, their tactical training completely inadequate for dealing with a species that responded to military conquest with offers of hospitality and home-cooked meals. As they entered Rosa's place, Admiral Zyketh caught sight of a framed certificate on the wall that read Puerto Refugio, survivor of hurricane categories 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, plus that really bad tsunami in '98, and the time the volcano almost erupted, but didn't. It was at that moment that Admiral Zyketh began to suspect that Earth's classification as a Class 15 Deathworld might not have been a clerical error after all. The realization hit him with the force of a small moon. They weren't conquering a primitive agricultural world. They were attempting to subjugate a species that considered surviving on a planet that regularly tried to kill them to be so routine that they barely thought it worth mentioning. And worse yet, these humans seemed to think that the appropriate response to visitors from the stars was to make sure they were well-fed and comfortable. As Rosa bustled around serving bowls of sancocho to bemused alien invaders, while Dr. Chen enthusiastically explained the local ecosystem and Captain Rodriguez offered to show them the best fishing spots, Admiral Zyketh realized that the Keltharian hegemony might have just accidentally started the universe's most expensive first-contact diplomatic mission. The conquest of Earth was officially over before it had begun, defeated not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by the terrifying human conviction that any problem could be solved with enough food, genuine concern, and stubborn determination to help whether you wanted to be helped or not. In his final report to Keltharian High Command, Admiral Zyketh would recommend that Earth be reclassified from primitive agricultural world to Class 15 Deathworld. Do not approach without extreme caution and several emergency therapy sessions. The recommendation would be approved unanimously.